Welcome back. Our design is made and our bias stems are constructed. Now it's time to transfer that design onto our background fabric, and I want to show you a couple of different techniques for that. The first is using a light box. Now this is a light box from the Daylight company. It's called the Wafer 2, and this one happens to be 12.5 inches by 17, which I think is just about perfect. There might be other sizes of this, but this is going to work really nicely for what we're working on. And here's the idea of it. Now watch out for the lights here because it's going to change up. So when I turn it on, it gets really bright, and you can use it really bright, but you can dim it down also, set any setting that you need. So we're going to bring it up to about, we're going to turn it off for a second. Okay, now we're going to bring our design. Remember that design we worked on? I've got my background fabric here. Now I want you to know the background fabric, I did use some Mary Ellen spray sizing to stiffen it up a little bit, which is always a good idea when you're going to do machine applique, which is what we will be doing. So I've stiffened that up. Now I'm going to take and pin it down onto the paper because I don't want it to shift around as I'm tracing it down. Whoops. There. And now when I turn on the light, you can see the design just as clear as can be. So now I'm going to trace that down. So my tool for doing this is a Pigment pen. There it is. So that's a Staedtler Pigment pen, and this one happens to be a 0.7. Don't go too much smaller than that. So 0.7, 8, or 9 is just about the right thickness. Now the truth is this is permanent. So when I mark on this fabric, it is going to be permanent, so I need to not mess up. There are other pens out there that I could use that would make it so if I messed up, I'd have a way out. But inevitably, it just doesn't ever work as well for me. So I like to use a Pigment pen. So now I'm going to just trace this design onto the fabric, and I can very clearly see where my design is. So take your time. Don't, try not to mess up. That's always a good idea. And then it won't make a difference that you've used a permanent marking pen to mark your background. So it just take me a little bit to get this complete. So that's all traced. Now when I turn the light off, I can see the design. So you do want to check. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten done. Oh, I forgot this one line, so double check it. I do want to show you one other way. So sometimes you'll be working on a design that a light colored background fabric like this just isn't the right thing for it. You might want to use a dark background. So this will just be a little tip for next time. Here is a dark colored fabric, which I would not even be able to see, maybe a little bit with the light board, but not enough. So for that, I use tracing paper. So this is called Transdoodle Tracing Paper. Honestly, I've had it for years, and I've used it for lots of things, mainly for being a seamstress. But when I'm transferring on to a dark design, this works really great. So I'm going to get this out. I'm just going to get one of the sheets. It comes up with multiple sheets. And the idea is you put your dark fabric down, then your Transdoodle on top of it, then place your design on top of the Transdoodle. Now this is a tracing pen. What it really is an ink pen with no ink in it. It's a ballpoint so that when you're doing the tracing, it glides right over it. And you can just trace your design. And surprisingly, you don't have to press very hard either. So I'll just do a little bit of this design here. So when you take it off, there's the design done with the Transdoodle. So I'm not sure if you can see it on camera, but I can see it pretty clearly that there is my design. So don't feel like you always have to use a light background. Consider how really cool it would look if you did a dark background one. So when we come back, I'm going to show you how we actually applied those bias stems to the designs, all the ins and outs and the unders and overs. All right, now this is honestly the funnest part of the whole process. It's kind of like doing a puzzle because you need to be thinking a little bit ahead and a little bit designing. And so when you're putting it down, it takes time. It'll probably take me 25 to 35 minutes to get these whole stems down. We won't make you watch it all. We're hoping to like do a little fast video here, so that'll be fun. So the first thing that we need to do that I forgot to do last time is those insets. Remember how on the design I decided that there would be insets? Well, now I've kind of changed my mind. We're going to do an inset here and an inset here and not do an inset out there. Okay, so here's the first one, and I've traced it onto freezer paper, and then the freezer paper, that waxy side on the back side kind of sticks down onto there, so I'm able to cut it out. And I'm going to take my glue stick and apply the glue stick here on the background fabric, and then bring this down. And I like it to dry kind of quickly, so I'll take my iron to it. Now that blue of the glue stick will go away. Okay. And then the four ends. Oh, that's upside down. There. There. So my insets are down. Now it's time to actually start laying down my design. So remember when we did the color coordinating here, my plan was that the star in the center and this kind of box going around it would be one color. Then we'd have another color to represent it by these red ones. And then the black would be this kind of really intertwining one. So keep in mind when you're doing these that the idea is that there be unders and overs. So taking this line here as a very simple example, as this line comes to the black line, this will be under the black fabric. As it continues across, it will be over the black fabric here. And there is not enough pre-planning you could do to really make a difference. So when I'm working on it, I'll be gluing down parts of it and then other parts, cutting things. All the under seams are where you're going to want to butt your two pieces together so that you don't actually have to sew these into one big long piece. So it'll make more sense as we go. So I do want to have this visible to me so that I can see what I'm, kind of my reference. And then here's all of my strips. I have them all set up, and I did not use that blue and white one that we stitched. I just have these three, but this one has those different colors that I think are really cool. So I think that the dark will be the one that makes this kind of loop-de-loo here. So if I'm looking at that, oh, and then the center star, I'm going to use this piece. So that'll be my center star. This will be my loop-de-loo star. And then the light blue, nope, I've changed my mind. The dark blue will be here and around the yellow out here. The light blue will be the loop-de-loo. So that'll be the thing going up and around, right? Told you it could get confusing. So to start with, we're going to use our Roxanne's glue. So the Roxanne's glue has this fabulous tip, so you're able to add the dots of glue where you need it. And you need to start your strip on an under. So this star, this piece of fabric going around the star is going to start here because this will be able to go over top of it. The blue piece will. So I'm going to snip it so I have a nice straight edge. And then I'm going to come in with the glue. Now with the glue, I like to put dots. They're about a ½ inch away. And I like to alternate when I have an inlay, on the inlay, off the inlay, so that it will actually hold down the inlay to the background. So if it's an under here, I'm going to turn that corner and then it'll be an over. So I'm only going to glue to that over. So starting here, Bring it nice and straight. Hold it down for a little bit. And then it's helpful to use an awl or a seam ripper to help you get a straight little turn here. There. And then I'm just going to glue it down to here. And then I'm going to hold it. Be kind of patient when you're working with this. Right. The next one, we've decided that the dark would be going up and around the loop-de-loo. So if it needs to be an over here, I need to get my dark piece ready. And when you're doing curves, it's easier to curve. Here's the seam, and so this is a perfect one for me to show it to you at. Remember how we have the stitching line and then the seam? The seam facing out is going to give you your best curve. So if you look at this, I can curve that because the seam is facing out. If I try to do it with the seam facing in, I cannot get as nice of a gentle curve. It's a little bit more difficult. So think that through whenever possible to try to get it so that on the curve the seam is out. And I bring that into right now because I want you to think about this curly Q here. That guy is going to be a little hard to do if you are not using the seam facing out. So I want my seam facing out. So I want to start with this end so that the seam is facing out, going that way. All right, so now I'm going to put my little dots of glue to start here. And then, oh my goodness, right here, I have another guy. So that's going to be the light blue. So I got to get my light blue guy ready. Okay. Now the light blue, I can actually put him down completely. He is not going to ever be over on these inside arches. He's always going to be an under, going under the dark blue section. So with the seam facing out, that is going to lay down really nicely. Then I could cut him off right here. And sometimes I just get impatient, so I just bring my iron in to help dry it up real fast. There. Now the dark blue can go over the end. I want to clip that a little bit closer. I don't want him to be sticking out. I'm going to put a dot of glue right on the light blue. So the dark blue will be under here because he's over there. He's going to be under here. So I can bring him all the way to here. He's going, nope, that's got to be an under. Do you see what I mean? But you've got to be talking yourself through this. The first part on the curly Q, you want that to be an under. So that'll be an under, so that'll be an over. So I'm going to pick up that glue a little bit so that I remember not to go past it. Now I can place, nope. Yep, that's right. Place that. So now it's going to cover the light blue. And then, oh my goodness, now I have to get the outside square ready. So let's move this back. And for the outside square, I was going to use that blue fabric again, but the blue fabric that has the brown lines on it. So this is going to be an under piece. So I'm going to take my glue. It's going to start here, right here where the dark blue was. It's going to go up to the point. And it'll be an over here, so I want to stop there. Use my awl to help to turn my corner, or my seam ripper rather. Bring it right to there. All right, whoops, look at that. I went too far. Let's try that again. There. Now I need to bring this a little bit closer to me so I can do that curly Q guy. So let's come on up here a little bit. All right. Curly Q will go over to here. So he's under there, so he will be over there. So before I can put this down, I need to put the light blue here. All right, yeah, that'll be perfect. So again, on the inlays, I dot on the inlay, off the inlay, on, off, on, off. have it. All right, so the girls did time me for doing this, and they timed it at about 50 minutes. And I got to brag a little bit, I'm pretty fast. So you've got to figure that this is going to be an hour and a half to 2 hour puzzle as you're laying it down. So don't get discouraged. Don't rush through it. Take your time. So I want to point out a couple of things that I had to take things out and put things back down again a little bit. So on the star, I thought it was important that I always had under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over. That worked. Then I thought the same thing because these are such bold differences that those be the same. So under, over. I'm sorry, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under. But then when it came to the corners, I was doing one, then I went the other way, and it ended up working out perfect. I loved this. So on this light one, it was the light blue is over, then under. But then when I came to this side, it was the light blue is under, then over. And I didn't realize it till I was over here. And so I was looking here. And so this one's over and under. And I'm like, oh no, this one is odd. Well, I just made it symmetrical. So these two are the same with an under and an over. And then these two are the same that way. So it's really kind of fun. All right. So when you're doing this, you need to take your time. Do not rush through it. Take your time, think under and over, watch a show while you're working on it. So when we come back, I'm going to talk to you about putting sashings on here, and then also methods that you can use for the applique portion of it. So once you have all of your bias stems glued down, then it's time for you to make a couple of decisions as to how you're going to finish it. Now, in the case of what I've been working on, that blue and yellow one, I am planning on those blocks to be part of a Quilt As You Go project. So I'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm not going to show you how I'm going to stitch those down here. I just want to give you a couple of ideas. So this particular one I stitched down by hand. So you might remember in episode 109 of all of our tutorials, that's one of the parts of the Learning to Quilt series. Myself and my friend Michelle go through very detailed instructions on how we do hand applique. So you could do that. So this was done with hand applique. I would just a couple of things, use silk thread. Here's my fun little thimble and a small needle. And it really is kind of fun. So you do the hand applique obviously before you quilt it. Inevitably, somebody is going to say, can I stitch it down with a double needle? And the answer is no. And this is why. So on this double wedding ring that you've now seen a few times, going around the edges, remember I used the clover bias tape. Wouldn't it be cool if you were doing a double wedding ring and you made your own bias tape any color you want now that you know how to do that, right? And this, being such a long, gentle curve, can be stitched down onto the quilt top with a double needle. Now, a double needle goes into your sewing machine just like a regular needle, but it like miraculously comes out with two needles, and it's really very cool. If you've never learned how to use a double needle, go to your sewing machine mechanic. He'll show you how to do it. But it cannot be used on these types of projects because there are so many tight turns and these tight turns and the points. You can't do it. A double needle cannot turn, and you can't do it quilt as you go as I plan to do, because on the back, and I don't know if you can see this, but this is what happens on the back. It is actually your bobbin zigzagging back and forth between the two needles. So you can't do this technique for a quilt as you go, but you can do a double needle technique for stitching down bias stems if your design is a nice gentle curve. Okay. So how I intend to do this is by machine, and I intend to do it what I call invisible machine applique. So I want you to see a couple of examples. So this one is done with invisible machine applique. You can see how to do that on our episode 108 in the Learning to Quilt series. Again, I go quite in depth on all the different tools I use, the needle I use, the stitch I use. But these were actually done invisible machine applique, quilt as you go. So I stitched that little teeny tiny zigzag through all of the layers on this quilt. And you can just barely, I'm not sure if we can get it zoomed in, but here you can see just the littlest bit of a zigzag in the bobbin thread. I'm okay with that. When you do it with the thread that isn't very noticeable, you really don't even notice that it's happened. But this one is really too big. When I did this, Quilt As You Go, I was not happy. It took me forever, and it was just so big and bulky in turning it. But then when I did this one, Quilt As You Go, I did enjoy it because it was so small and I could just turn and get all of my around all my corners. So that was done Quilt As You Go. This was actually done Quilt As You Go too. And what's funny about this, I really never intended to put this cable on here. I was just going to finish the quilt, so I got it. It actually is a Quilt As You Go project, and I got my border on, and then it looked so boring that I had to put something on the border. And so that's when I did the 1/2-inch stems. Really, really interesting way to finish a quilt and give it all the pizzazz that, just a regular border isn't going to give it. So for this project, the one that we've been working on, I want to show you how I plan to finish it. So here is a quilted tile. This is the first one. And this is a 4-block quilt. This was done invisible machine applique, quilt as you go. So I quilted down the stems, going through all the layers, 1 block at a time. So not trying to do the whole thing like I did with that first large one, 1 block at a time. Then when all the blocks are done, then there's a process for putting sashings on. It's really very cool. The idea of Quilt As You Go or quilting in sections is one of the ways that you can finish your own quilts without having to send them off to the long armor all the time. Nothing against long armors, but there's just those times when you really want to finish your own quilt, right? So I hope you enjoyed our series. Our next series will be on the Quilt As You Go. So to be sure that you don't miss that series, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification button, that little bell down there. I think it's on the right-hand side, and that will let you know when we have published a new video. We do live videos a couple of times a month too, trying to show you some new techniques on things also. So I hope you enjoy all that. If you have any questions, you can email me at quiltingwithnancy@gmail.com. I try to get back to you as quickly as I can. And the book for the Learning to Quilt, that is actually available for purchase on our website, which is www.onpoint-tv.com. Have a great day.